Hundreds of people have been arrested in the US following fresh protests against the recent killings of 2 black men by police. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where 37-year-old Alton Sterling was shot dead by officers last Tuesday, armed Black Panther activists confronted the authorities. More than 100 people were detained. In St. Paul, Minnesota, protesters forced the closure of a highway and hurled fireworks and other projectiles at police. Anger in the city remains at boiling point over the killing of 32-year-old Philando Castile on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the situation in Dallas, where 5 white police officers were gunned down by a sniper on Thursday night, also remains tense. Amid fresh security fears, officers and residents in the city are still trying to come to terms with the shootings.
We have a good working relationship with our community. I'm saying it's not a perfect deal, but I'm saying we try to make sure that we understand who we serve, and the people and citizens here, they give us love and support.
Hundreds of people, including Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlins, continue to pay tribute to the 5 dead officers at a makeshift memorial outside the city's police headquarters.
We're back now with a Fox News alert. Black Lives Matter protests break out near the U.S. Embassy in London. You can see there protesters reportedly chanting, "Hands up, don't shoot," and quote, "These cop killers have got to go." This is the 2nd straight day of these protests in London.
Well, I'm upset. I mean, we're only here for a couple of days, right? So, yeah, it's annoying.
Secretary of State John Kerry today declared that ISIS atrocities against Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims amount to genocide. Many groups have been calling on Kerry to make that designation, and Nina Shea is the director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. She joins us now to explain what this means and how it will affect those groups going forward. Nina, I know that many religious rights advocates, you included, have been calling on the U.S. to call this genocide. Why is that so important?
It's a critically important step, and it really shouldn't have been this difficult, because ISIS is reviled by the entire world, and everybody knows that they have been shattering these communities, especially the Christian and Yazidi communities. And there's been a hang-up because the administration was reluctant to name the Christians among the groups that are suffering genocide.
Now, if we put aside the UK for a minute, many experts say the next biggest worry for the EU right now is Italy. In particular, its banks, which are sitting on billions of dollars of bad debts, money that will never be paid back. The EU, especially Germany, is warning Italy not to break EU banking rules by bailing out its banks. But Italy's Prime Minister is in no mood to be lectured. This is a story that could hit us all.
As Italy celebrates the restoration of one of its biggest attractions, the country is facing a colossal task. Its banking system is struggling. Already loaded with a mountain of bad loans, shares have slumped by more than 30% since the Brexit vote. Italy is responsible for around a third of the Eurozone's total debt, and its banks are now the most vulnerable in the EU. According to the Financial Times newspaper, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has said he will pump billions of dollars into the banking system. He's denied that report, but if he did do that, it would breach new EU rules on how struggling banks should be handled. Those rules were implemented in January. They say private creditors, so that includes bondholders and savers, need to take a hit before the taxpayer can step in to rescue a bank. Europe's regulators fear such an intervention would devastate the credibility of the bloc's new rules. And Italy is not the only country causing a headache for Brussels. Last year, Spain and Portugal failed to bring their budget deficits to within limits set by the EU. That's something that could lead to financial penalties. And as Greece's economy continues to struggle, the EU now faces several threats and is under more pressure than ever before.
Growth was already weak before we had this most recent upsurge in angst about the banking sector particularly. It's difficult to see how the economy can actually sort of make progress, how inward investment can actually regain confidence without some sort of like breaking of the impasse.
Italy's banks are saddled with €360 billion of bad loans. The drop in their share price after the Brexit vote added urgency to talks taking place in Brussels.
It looks very, very likely that some form of action with regards to recapitalisation is going to take place. Knowing what we know about the financial culture, you know, and the way that kind of interleaves with the consumer in Italy, we know that it could actually stoke political destabilisation even further in Italy. And that's obviously something that would rankle greatly with both, you know, the political establishment in Italy and also in the Eurozone itself.
Official growth predictions for the full year still stand at 1.2%, but ministers have admitted that's likely to be revised down due to the repercussions from the Brexit vote.
North Korea's military has threatened to take what it's called a physical response to a move by the US and South Korea to deploy an advanced missile defense system. The US says the system is designed to counter the threat from the north in the light of Pyongyang's growing nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities.
From now the end begins. Iran says that 100,000 missiles in Lebanon are readied for the annihilation of Israel.
امروز به فضل الهی ظرفیت امحاق و محو و پروپاشی رژیم صهیونیستی بیش از هر زمان دیگری فراهم شده است. فقط در لبنان بیش از 100,000 موشک قائم آماده پروازند تا هر زمان که اراده شود و مصلحت دیده شود و اگر رژیم صهیونیستی بخواهد با برآوردهای غلط دوباره به تکرار خطاهای گذشته دست بزند، این موشک‌ها سینه فضا را بشکافند و بر قلب رژیم صهیونیستی فرود آیند و مقدمات یک فروپاشی بزرگ را در عصر جدید
New guidelines by the International Olympic Committee say transgender athletes should be allowed to compete in the Olympics and other international events with few restrictions. In the proposal released on January 24th, the IOC said it was important that, quote, trans athletes are not excluded from the opportunity to participate in sporting competition.
Fresh clashes have erupted in Juba between forces loyal to the president and those supporting the vice president, renewing fears South Sudan will slip back into full-blown civil war. The fighting in the capital comes just hours after the United Nations warned attacks against civilians and its personnel may constitute war crimes. At least one UN peacekeeper has been killed and a number of Chinese and Rwandan staff injured.
Security Council members stressed that attacks against civilians and UN premises and personnel may constitute war crimes.
5-year-old Carletta Obere is trying to regain her strength. She's severely malnourished. Just weeks ago, her mother Cecilia and Carletta decided to flee their home, which is currently experiencing the worst drought in decades.
I had to leave my home as my husband died and no one was helping me. My children suffered there. There is a serious drought in South Sudan. There is no rain and there is a lot of hunger. We also have a lot of insecurity.
They came to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. Here, Carletta is being cared for by doctors and nurses at an emergency feeding center. The camp is home to nearly 200,000 refugees. Most are from South Sudan. UNHCR and its partners provide food and life-saving medical care. However, the number of such children arriving at the camp keeps rising.
So observe that among the children, there are very malnourished children.
The world's youngest nation is still struggling with the effects of civil war, despite a peace agreement signed last year. People are still fleeing violence, and with a prolonged drought in the country, the wait for peace and security now seems distant.
China has warned of rising tensions in the South China Sea ahead of a UN decision on territorial claims in the area. The Philippines launched the challenge to the legality of Chinese claims at the UN in 2013. There are fears that an unfavourable ruling could provoke a military response by Beijing after Chinese warships conducted live-fire military exercises in disputed waters over the weekend.
Colombia has been invaded by Venezuelans desperate to buy much-needed food and medicine and basic goods like toilet paper and soap. An estimated 35,000 took advantage of a 12-hour temporary border opening. A severe economic crisis following a decline in oil revenues has caused critical shortages in their country. This woman said, "I was crying as I crossed the bridge when I saw the avalanche of people. It's unbelievable to me that all of Venezuela wants to come here to this neighboring country to look for the things we can't get over there. Every day there are fewer things." Shelves emptied swiftly on the Colombian side of the border, where shops accepted the depreciating Venezuelan currency, the bolivar. This cross-border shopper said it's a relief to be able to come here to find our products, our medicines that we can't really get over there. We don't have food, we don't have cooking oil, we don't have flour. That's why we have to come here. Critics blame Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's economic policies for the shortages, which got worse as oil prices fell. He ordered the border closed 11 months ago to crack down on smuggling and following an attack on a customs post by former Colombian anti-government fighters.